What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, and today I'm back to talk to you about Warhammer 40K, as well as Bloodborne, and of course, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, more specifically, Dante's Inferno. So, for the longest time, I've been working on my fan chapter lore for the Lost Legion, the 11th Legion, and their Space Marines, which I've created to be the Celestial Sons. So the Celestial Sons have been fighting for the Emperor's goal of liberating humanity and just achieving a better Imperium for humankind. Unfortunately, through the machinations of Zeech, this doesn't end up occurring. The Emperor, for one reason or another, has then enacted the Edict of Obliteration, and during this time, some of the Celestial Sons have fallen into chaos. And this is really an eye-opening experience for me, because for the most part, whenever you're creating 40k lore, there's a lot of, facts and stuff that you gotta get right in order for the lore to make sense. For example, you can't just pick like a successor chapter of the Ultramarines and have them be chaotic, because lore-wise, there's nothing really indicating of the Ultramarines having like a gene defect or anything along those lines, so it's going to be a little bit harder to figure out ways as to why that successor is behaving the way it is, why hasn't the Inquisition looked into it and whatnot. So with keeping that in mind, I've kind of crafted the lore to fit into the history and overall the whole theme of Warhammer 40k, and I think I'm doing a good job so far. I do want to have you guys check out the lore for it, so I'm going to put the playlist down at the end of the video so you guys can check out the quote-unquote official, unofficial fan lore for the 11th Legion, the Celestial Sons. But for now, I want to focus on the chaotic half of my fan legion, the fallen Celestial Sons that go by the name of the Infernal Sons. And I've been drawing a bunch of inspiration from the two works of fiction that I previously spoke about, Bloodborne and the Inferno section of Dante's Divine Comedy. Now, Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time. Just the theme, the atmosphere, the grim darkness, the horror aspect of the whole game is just amazing. It's made by From Software, the same guys who do the Dark Souls, and that's another really fun, great video game series that I really do enjoy. However, when it comes to Bloodborne, if you're not familiar with it, I'll show you the little opening so you can really get a good sense of what this game is about. Hive City, Canehurst. Not the best town, but still a pretty good place to live. That is until last night. Flashing lights enveloped the planetary governor's residence, and ever since then, the populace hasn't been the same. They're more aggressive, even bestial in nature, no matter. I am an enforcer of the Hunter Division, and I will cleanse this plague. But first, I must find out. What exactly is going on here? So as you can see, basically you're within a Gothic city that has been creating a cure for certain ailments, and because of that, many people flock to this place. However, recently, the people of the city have been turning into beasts, and it's pretty much up to you to figure out what exactly is going on here and how to pretty much save everybody, but at the same time, how to save yourself. I don't want to go too deep into spoilers, so that's a very, basic synopsis for it. However, how does this translate to my army? Well, when I'm creating my Infernal Sons, I wanted something to be a driving force. Because when you think chaos, most of the time you just think, oh, death to the Imperium, burn the false emperor. And I wanted to do something a little bit different with that, which I'll get into a little bit later. But for now, let me give you an overview as to the Divine Comedy from the poem that was written a very, very long time ago. So it's a poem that takes place over three, sections, places. The first being Inferno, which takes place in hell. After that, he goes into purgatory, and then finally Dante traverses into paradise, Paradiso, aka heaven. And this journey is being followed by Dante, the main character, and he has an aide, a guide, and that is Virgil. Together they go into the 9 circles of hell, and you get to see a whole bunch of political things as well as Greek and Roman elements thrown into it. And overall, it's an allegory for life, an allegory for how to be a better person in a way. There's a lot of themes about good and evil. Should science prevail? Should religion prevail? And that kind of thing. And overall, it's a journey that brings you, or supposed to bring you, closer towards God. And to do this, you have to fully recognize and reject sin, and to fully understand what sins are, what it is. You have to go through hell and purgatory before you can achieve this enlightenment through going into paradise. Now, back in high school, I did a 15-page paper on this. I was minoring in philosophy in college, and I had a thesis based around sins and humanity and that kind of thing, finding the self. So I've had a lot to deal with Dante's interpretation of, more specifically, Inferno than Purgatory and Paradise. So if you haven't read this, I greatly, greatly recommend it to you guys. If you're into philosophy, critical thinking, that kind of thing, you could really gain a lot of insight and stuff with this. Depending on which version you get of the poem, it could be a little bit difficult to understand. The translations may not be 100% correct, so it kind of depends on which version you do read. Surprisingly enough, they actually made a game about this a few years back. It was essentially a God of War-esque game as you traverse the 9 circles of hell, sin, greed, that kind of stuff. So either play the game or I recommend just reading it. But now that we kind of have a little introduction, a little common ground as to what I'm going to be talking about, let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of this video. So as I stated prior, the 11th Legion, the Celestial Sons, fought alongside their Primarch, Alec Elric, for a single purpose, and that purpose was to free humanity from their Xeno overlords and bring them back into Imperium of Man compliance. These Astartes became known as a beacon of hope throughout humanity, a light amid the grim darkness of the universe. However, even the brightest light will cast a dark shadow. Since Elric's inception, the Primarch was claimed by none other than the Chaos God Tzeentch. The Changer of Ways orchestrated the downfall of Elric and his marines, and upon the moon of Eldia, the light of the celestial suns began to flicker and dim, as Dante Hueco and Virgil Oscuras began their descent into chaos. They then began to gather more and more battle brothers to their side, converting them into renegades. But then the sky began to darken, as the Emperor had issued the Edict of Obliteration. By now, you probably are seeing some blatant similarities, and others not so in your face. So for example, the soon-to-be Chaos Lord and his second-in-command share their names with Dante and Virgil. In the beginning of the poem, Dante sees a mountain before him and the shining sun atop of it. This is their Primarch's goal. This is what it represents: humanity's freedom. However, to get to this mountain, Dante has to trek through the dark woods. And this is represented by all the battles being waged, fighting for the Imperium's sake. However, during the Emperor's Edict of Obliteration, that's when the Space Wolves, the Sisters of Battle, and the Adeptus Custodes launched their attack in order to kill and end the Celestial Suns. These three Astarte factions are the three beasts that block the paths to the mountain. This is represented by the lion, being the Custodes, the she-wolf, being the Sisters of Silence, and the leopard, the Space Wolves. So with no other choice, Dante has to basically enact an accursed ritual, opening up a warp gate and making a deal, a pact with not Tzeentch, but with a minor chaos god, the god of despair, Anabath. Anabath is a minor chaos god that I created. The word itself is Welsh, and it means despair, desperation, and basically everything that this god encompasses is a feeling of hopelessness, loss, dejection, and oftentimes this leads to suicide or to just take somebody away from the light of the Imperium. And this Chaos God is flourishing because in this millennium there is only war going on in the galaxy. It's not great to be a sentient being when all you can expect is famine, war, and this god is gaining power. However, he's kind of on the heels of Tzeentch, where Tzeentch wanted to claim this Astarte chapter for himself. Now Dante and Virgil have turned themselves away from the Changer of Ways and have decided to ally themselves with this minor god. So, literally speaking, Anabath is the doorway that starts the renegade Celestial Suns into becoming full-fledged Chaos Space Marines. And in the poem, when Dante and Virgil descend into hell, of course you get to the phrase, the well-known phrase, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." Now, of course, you don't just get to double-cross Tzeentch and get away with it unscathed. So, Tzeentch ended up cursing any of the fallen Celestial Suns, the newly called Infernal Suns, to burn for all eternity, until finally Dante chose a sacrifice. He basically said, "Free us from this warp fire, free us from this pain. In return, you can take our sight." And Tzeentch agreed. So their eyes were reduced to ash, and they became blind. In the poem, when they reach the seventh circle of violence, you have sinners here who have sinned against God, and for sinning against God, they suffer for all eternity via ash and flame, which is exactly what's happening here. The Infernal Sons betrayed Zeech, aka God, or a god at least, and so they were destined to suffer for all eternity in flames. However, that's when Dante made the sacrifice for sight, and so their eyes were reduced to ash, and this is essentially, well, I guess you could say their suffering happened for an eternity, because as Annabeth was channeling them, saving them from the Edict of Obliteration, they entered the warp. And as we all know, the warp is timeless, but at the same time it's not. It works differently than real space. If you go into the warp and you come out of the warp, it could be months, years, decades, hundreds of years that have passed in real time, but it may only seem like a little bit that they were actually in the warp, or vice versa. They can go into the warp and come out thousands of years in the past. So this was my interpretation of eternity, because we don't know exactly how long the Infernal Sons were in the warp before they rematerialized into real space. So to them, the suffering that Zeech caused them lasted for an eternity. So these Infernal Sons who saw a beacon of light by joining Annabeth from being saved from the Edict of Obliteration by the God Emperor are now devoid of light. They can't see this bright future for them anymore. All they can see now is darkness. At this point, we start to diverge a little bit away from Dante's Inferno and get more inspiration from Bloodborne. So, for example, their patron god, their new patron god, Annabeth, has now given them a task. For each heretic Astarte has to consume 100 awakened brains in order to attain the cosmic truth, and thus they will then ascend into godhood. So in order to find somebody with an awakened brain, they have to have gained knowledge, so much knowledge, that it grants them insanity. Oftentimes this just means kill a psyker and eat their brain. That counts as an awakened brain. Psychers have an awakened brain. So anybody that is basically insane, they gotta kill and eat their brains in order to achieve apotheosis and ascend into like a demon prince, a greater demon, that kind of thing. However, they're not just gonna kill them and eat their brain right then and there. The insane will have to be beheaded, and then their severed heads are then taken to the Infernal Sons' demon forge within the city of Dis. This is another reference to Dante's Inferno. Dis is a city located in the Sixth Circle where heretics resides. Heretic Astartes, heretics, etc. Within this demon forge, they use warp flame that cleanses the head, burning away the sins of the flesh, leaving only the skull and the brain intact within. The Infernal Son, who then killed the person that was insane, then consumes the brain and takes the skull as a trophy, signifying basically the more skulls you have, the closer you are to becoming holy, aka, achieving godhood, becoming a demon. And once they consume 100 awakened brains, the Chaos Marine then attains demonhood, and that is their purgatory. For when they are killed as a demon, they are heralded into the warp, granting them passage into paradise. And this is the Divine Comedy. Inferno as a Chaos Space Marine, Purgatory as a demon, and achieving paradise by going back into the warp once you've died in your demon state. This is the overview for my Infernal Sons fan chapter. That's where everything basically is going to stem off of. So their whole timeline of events, I'm going to make a full video on it. But I'll give you a little bit extra, just because why not? So Virgil Oscuras is the right hand of Dante Hueco, which is the Chaos Lord, the leader of the Infernal Sons. So Virgil is his muscle, his counselor, his advisor, I guess you could say friend, if Chaos Space Marines have friends. But Virgil Escuras, spoiler alert, has ascended into demonhood status. He is a hulking, massive demon prince on the tabletop. Usually I play him as a demon prince of Khorne. But the thing about him is that his blood is burning within his body, which gives him kind of that scorched look. All across his body, he's riddled with spears, swords, and arrows, which he then plucks off and throws them at his enemies. However, since he's got that boiling blood, when he plunges the arrow out of himself, or I guess pulls it out of himself, the blood ignites, and now he's got like a flaming arrow, a flaming sword that he could throw at his enemies, which on the tabletop is represented as a warp bolter. His main weapon is a lance that he calls Nessus. It is a demon lance. In the game, in the tabletop, it's just malefic talents because they're better than a sword or an axe. But in Dante's Inferno, this all makes sense because within the circle of violence, there is a lake of boiling blood where sinners burn for eternity. However, upon the shores of this lake are centaurs that fire a hail of arrows at any of the sinners who attempt to escape. One of these centaurs goes by the name of Nessus. So you have the boiling blood, you've got the arrows launched by the centaurs, and you have Nessus, all coalescing into this demon prince, Virgil Escuras. And with that, that has been just a insight into my fan chaos warband, the Infernal Sons, and just how you can take inspiration from other media and tie it into your games. Because when you play 40k, it adds another level of epicness, of awesomeness, when you're playing an army that you've crafted the background to. Every character has motivations. Every action that occurs on the tabletop has repercussions for your army. And it's just interesting to see that narrative play out in your head as you're actually playing it out on the battlefield. So, no longer do I just have a Demon Prince of Khorne just trying to rush into my enemy. Now I have Virgil Escuras trying to lead a pathway to the enemy, allowing Dante to come up behind him. Again, it's just a little extra that I like to have in my games. And I think most of you wargamers probably already do that. If not, try it. It's going to be tons of fun. If you're into the whole hobby aspect of it, converting is another thing you can do to add more life to your characters. Because it's fun and all to just, play in 40k army that's competitive. It's, everything's based around what's great this edition. It's all like min-maxing, you're playing to... It's a game, you're playing to win. However, playing narratively, playing campaigns, that's another whole side of the hobby that I really enjoy the most. Because I'm not one who likes building and painting. I enjoy this part of the hobby the most. Making stories, making my miniatures come to life, breathing a new breath of fresh air into certain models and really making them their own. Let me know what you guys think. Again, I will be putting a link to my fan lore for the Celestial Sons, just so you guys can check it out, see what the non-chaos side of my army is like. And that's all I got for today. Thank you for listening, guys. I can't wait to read your responses down below. If you have any other inklings, tips, anything like that you want to, tell me about what I should change or what I could add to the army. I'm playing Dante wrong and you want me to do this or do that, write it down below. I'll read it. And yeah, that's all I got. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.